Swamiji.
Namaste, Swamiji.
So we will continue from where we left. We are coming to the last portion before we start discussing Patanjali's Yoga Sutras with Swamiji's commentary. So the last few verses of Kurma Purana, which has been translated by Swamiji, it ends, and then Swamiji ends with a small story of Narada, which explains the importance of patience, which is an essential characteristic of a yogi. If one has to perform yoga or practice yoga sincerely, then one should have tremendous patience. So that story about Narada and his when he was traveling, he comes across a person. He comes across a few people, sadhakas, and their attitude shows very clearly how the yogis, what should be the attitude of the yogis. So we come to that later, but before that we'll finish with the last few verses of Kurma Purana, where these things have been discussed. This slok of the Gita, there's an important slok in the Bhagavad Gita, which says, Yasmanno dvijate loko, lokanno dvijate chaya, harsha marsha bhayo udvegahi, bhakta samay priya, yo mad bhakta samay priya. That means such a devotee is dear to me. So what are the characteristics of devotee? Yasmanno dvijate loko. So this has found its way into Kurma Purana as well, and Swamiji is translating it. From whom comes no disturbance, who cannot be disturbed by others. Yasmanno dvijate loko, lokanno dvijate chaya. That means one who cannot be disturbed by others, and one who does not disturb others. It follows from these principles that if you want to prevent yourself from being disturbed by others, then naturally you can't disturb others. So anybody who doesn't believe or does not disturb others is likely to be not disturbed when others try to disturb him. So this is a very important shloka, which in effect means just we should focus on minding our own business. That is, be happy, be an Atma Rama, one who finds joy in oneself. Now that is not selfishness. Atma Rama is the name Swamiji gave to Sri Ramakrishna. He always used to refer to, especially after his passing away. So he used to say, Atma Ramer Kota, the relics of Atma Rama. So the meaning is Atma Rama, Atma Rama, one who revels or one who finds joy in being alone, in being left to himself. So for a yogi, he has to be under peaceful circumstances. To have that mental peace, to have that atmosphere of peace around him, he should not be disturbing the peace of others. That is the first condition. Yasman no dvijate loko, lokan no dvijate chaya. He doesn't disturb other lokas. Lokas means other people. And as a result, he trains himself not to be disturbed by others. So he likes to be left to himself as far as possible, and at least mentally, if not physically. Physically one can be with others, but one can be very indrawn or happy with oneself. If one's mind is disturbed, he is likely to disturb others also, and those in the vicinity. those people who are in the vicinity will likely to are likely to be disturbed by the mental vibrations of such a person. So the essential condition of not disturbing others is not to get disturbed by others. So only a yogi who is at peace with himself can hope to create peace around him with the people. He can live in peace with other people. If he is always curious, always poking his nose everywhere and trying to disturb the peace around him, then there is very little chance that he himself will be at peace. So in the interest of both the people around him and in the interest of his own peace, for the sake of his own peace, he should try to follow this principle. So Holy Mother used to say, if you want peace, don't try to see the fault of others. The moment you try to see the fault of others and get involved in that, you lose your mental peace. And you also make the people around you lose their mental peace. So that's why this first verse says, from whom comes no disturbance and who cannot be disturbed by others. Such who is free from joy, anger, harsha, marsha, bhaya, udvegahi, means harsha, amarsha. Harsha means joy, excessive joy, mirth, and amarsha means a kind of sorrow. So they say the person who is excessively joyful, I mean in the worldly sense, in the gross sense, who tries to always be full of not joy, not bliss, but this joy is a kind of worldly joy. So one is free from joy. What do you mean by free from joy? Everybody wants to be joyful. Nobody wants to be sad. But here joy is not meant, not the joy which comes out of peace, but the so-called joy which is a result of restlessness. So even restlessness can give you temporary joy or temporary pleasure, but then you will have to be prepared for the sorrow also. So one who is free from joy and sorrow, fear and anxiety. So fear of facing sorrow. Everybody wants to live in joy, but the joy, if it is not a permanent or a joy born out of peace, then there is every chance that he will be anxious. He will be fearful of losing that joyful state. So that gives rise to anxiety, that fear. Fear is something which when there is some real trouble, when some sorrow is approaching, then you fear that. But anxiety is something which is not explainable, because you are fearing something which may or may not happen. Only the possibility of getting sorrow will make you anxious. You may think, oh, I have this joy now, but will it last? Will I be able to be joyful always? And will this joy continue? So that fear, that anxiety that comes from worry, that worry and fear and anxiety. So one has to be free from a temporary joy, the so-called joy, pleasure of the world, and we should be free from sorrow also. You should not be unnecessarily lamenting about things which have not happened the way he would like to happen. So free from joy and anger means free from excessive mirth, or like you sometimes get some worldly gift or something, then you feel joyful. But that should be under control. One should try to maintain some kind of calm. So free from joy means that. Free from joy and sorrow, fear and anxiety. Such a one is my beloved. So, Yo mad bhakta same priya means one who is devoted and who is not disturbed by others, nor does he disturb others, who is free from joy and anger, free from fear, free from all types of anxieties. He is a real devotee. He is my beloved. That's what Sri Krishna says, and it is reproduced here in the Kurma Purana. He who does not depend on anything. Dependence is always connected with misery. Our Misery is because we are dependent on so many things. We are dependent on sweet words, we are dependent on good behavior of others, we are dependent on good health. So there are so many things preconditioned for our happiness. Our happiness is not unconditional, it is full of conditions. And when there are so many conditions, then dependence comes. So we want, some people feel that if they don't have company, they will feel sorrowful. So they seek company. So they are dependent on the company they have. And if that company is not good, if that company is not holy, or maybe it is not good, it can be detrimental, it can give rise to sorrow. So he seeks company with the idea of getting joy, but then he ends up getting sorrow. So dependence on anything gross in this world, and not getting it is the reason why we become sorrowful. So dependence is always misery. That's why Kurma Purana says, he who does not depend on anything, who is pure and active. You see, a passive person also can be pure. A passive person also can be without any activity. But if he doesn't, if he is not proactive, if he is not active, then this calmness or that peace can be a temporary peace which is born out of tamas. So there are people who, because tamas and sattva are almost same. Rajas makes you active. But after activity, that activity, if you learn to work in a proper way, if you do it as karma yoga, then activity does not disturb your peace. If it is done out of rajas, the element of rajas is there, power, ambition, desire. If those things are there, then that activity can be rajasic. But tamasic and sattvic activities are same. But in tamas there is no activity. In sattva there is activity, but there is calm and peace. So a person who is efficiently and quietly working, continuously working, doing some work, but not getting agitated by rajas, that is what is meant here. So one who is pure, so purity means one is full of sattva. So that is the precondition. If one is not pure, then one becomes tamasic. Even in that case, he becomes inactive. A tamasic person is inactive. A sattvic person has a tendency to become inactive outwardly. But if he is full of action, that is, he is active, is pure as well as active, then the real benefit of sattva accrues to a person. So a one who is pure and active, who does not care whether good comes or evil, and never becomes miserable. So he is not dependent on anything. He just takes things as they come. So contentment is a great virtue, Holy Mother said. Contentment is a very great virtue, because when there is contentment, he does not care whether good comes or evil. Whatever comes, good joy comes or sorrow, he is equal to both, because one who is free from joy and sorrow, that was the first condition which Kurma Purana lays out. So if that condition is there, then he is not dependent on anything. He is neither dependent on joy, the small joy, nor is he dependent on sorrow. Sorrow, of course, is because you don't get joy. Then you get evil things or you get bad things, you become sorrowful. So one who is pure and active, does not care whether good comes or evil, and never becomes miserable, who has given up all efforts for himself, who is the same in praise or in blame. Now, one who has given up all efforts for himself. Now, what does it mean? Should we not work? This is a very important thing. What here the Purana means is that one who has given up all efforts for himself means he doesn't do anything with a sense of ego, a strong ego. If he does it as swadharma, as a duty, in a detached way, that is what the whole secret of Gita. In fact, Gita teaches you that one does not have to be highly full of ego to work or to do anything. So all the efforts, Kurma Purana doesn't say you give up all the efforts. You have to put in efforts. but see that there is no element of selfishness in that. So any effort that is not selfish, that goes to that is highly, he is full of activity, he is very active, but he is pure, he doesn't have an ego. So such efforts, undertaking only such efforts, help a person to become a yogi. That's why he says, who has given up all efforts for himself. That doesn't mean you have to give up efforts for others, efforts for something which does not lead to a strong sense of ego or rajasic ego. So, who is the same in praise or in blame? If that is the case, then you don't bother. You do your best and then don't bother whether the world praises you or blames you. Because when you do things unselfishly, you will be hurting the interests of many people who have selfishness as the goal of their life. If for example, somebody is very wealthy and he has a big family and he tries to become unselfish and distribute for food or maybe money or his wealth, some of his wealth, to deserving people. And if he does that, then he is doing it without, he has given up all efforts for himself, but whatever he has, he is trying to share it with others. But there are certain people whose selfish interests will be hurt. There are members of the family perhaps who stop you from doing that because they are selfish, they want everything for themselves. So that is why you will be blamed because of that. Some people will praise you, the beneficiaries will praise you. So without taking into consideration the praise or blame, praise of people who are unselfish, they will be happy if you are doing some good work, so they will praise you. But there will be people who are selfish who will blame you. So the same action which is good for some people may be bad for some other people, and it is blameworthy for somebody, praiseworthy for somebody else. So a neutral person will appreciate if somebody is charitable. But if the charity is at the cost of the family members who are selfish, they will feel that this person is charitable, he is getting praise, he is praised by society, but he has caused so much harm to me, he is depriving me of this wealth. So that selfishness makes him blame that same activity. The activity which was praiseworthy to some section of the people becomes blameworthy to other sections of the people. So being same in praise or in blame means exactly that. So that is why Gita insists on that. One who is same to praise and blame, and he has given up all efforts for himself. I mean, he works in a very unselfish or a detached way, with a silent, thoughtful mind, blessed with whatever little comes in his way, homeless, for the whole world is his home. Now this is aniketaha. There is a word in the Gita, one who is aniketaha. That doesn't mean he should not stay in a home. He feels wherever he stays is his home. He feels comfortable. He doesn't have that strong sense of possession that this is my home, this is somebody else's home. He is equally comfortable. Normally, that is what monks do. Monks are supposed to stay in places which are not their own. They don't possess it. But at the same time, they don't mind staying. So that is the meaning of homeless, not that you stay on the street or something like that. So with a silent, thoughtful mind. Now silent mind is a consequence of practicing yoga. So one who has controlled the mind can only aspire to have a very silent mind, which is calm mind. A silent, thoughtful mind. But that doesn't mean a mind which is not working can be silent or can be inactive because of tamas also. So that is the conflict that we have to be very careful. Purity but activity. So just to prevent from going into tamas and encouraging sattvic activity, the Kurma Purana says, one who, whatever little comes his way, so he doesn't bother about whether a good thing comes to him or a bad thing comes to him. He is equal, he is neutral, because he doesn't, he has to be same in praise and blame. A person who gives up all efforts for himself is likely to be tamasic. That is the idea here, that if a person doesn't give, then he can become lazy. But to prevent that, he says, whatever comes his way, in his way. So he should be content. The idea is that he should always be active, always be pure, use dharmic means and pure means to achieve the required end, to achieve the required or maybe use the proper means to achieve the end, which is yoga. The end is always yoga, union with God, but at the same time, when he is aspiring to do that through activity, the activity should be such that it should be pure, at the same time he should be active, so that he doesn't lapse into tamas. That is the idea. So a silent, thoughtful mind can come. Thoughtful word has been used just to say that a silent mind can be a lazy mind. He prefers silence because he doesn't want disturbance and he just keeps quiet and doesn't, but activity is stopped. So mind should be thoughtful, it should be discriminative. We have to judge what is right, what is wrong, use our buddhi. So that does not prevent us. Silence does not mean that you should keep your mind inactive. It should be fully active, either doing japa or either doing japa or discrimination or thinking about the real and the unreal. So the mind should be active. That's why they say the idle mind is a devil's workshop. If you allow the mind to be silent and keep it idle without making it thoughtful, then it will work, it will go in a random way, it will become a devil's workshop. So so many bad ideas and bad things will come. So silent, but at the same time a discriminative or a thoughtful mind, blessed with whatever little comes in his way, homeless, for the whole world is his home, and who is steady in his ideas, such a one is my beloved bhakta. Such alone become yogi. So these are some of the conditions which you will find in the Bhagavad Gita. One who does not disturb others, one who is not disturbed by others, one who is free from unnecessary mirth, joy, and also sorrow, who is free from all sorts of fear, small and big, who is not anxious or worried about uncertainties of life. Then one who is independent or not dependent on anything. As far as possible, he does not depend on other things to make him happy or to make him content. He is happy with whatever he has. One who is pure and active, who does not care whether good comes or evil. So he is happy because he knows, because of karma there are so many things which will come to a person. Sometimes good will come, sometimes evil will. So you have to be even-minded in pain and pleasure, in good and bad. So that's the idea. Who does not care whether good comes or evil never becomes miserable. As a result, he never becomes miserable because he is not expecting anything. He is content with whatever comes. If good comes, he welcomes it. If bad comes, he endures it. That's all. With a silent, thoughtful mind, who has given up all efforts for himself. He does not do anything with a intensely selfish attitude, not for himself, but he doesn't stop working, he is active. Who is the same in praise or blame. So every activity will be beneficial to some and it will not be beneficial to selfish people. It will be beneficial to neutral people or who are unselfish, but it will be not beneficial in many cases to. So there will be always people who will praise you or blame you. So you have to take it with equanimity, not get disturbed. That is the condition for a yogi. Then we come to a silent, a mind which has been subdued by meditation, by pratyahara, dharana and then dhyana. Silent, thoughtful mind, but a discriminative and thoughtful mind. Blessed with whatever little comes in his way, he is content with that. Homeless, for the whole world is his home. So he feels the whole world is my own. the little portion of property which I call my own, though I have paid for it, but I am living it just as I live in a rented house. That should be an idea that by God's grace I have got a home. All the homes in the world are my own, but this little portion where I am staying, I should be happy with whatever little home I have got. So in that case, aniketaha means, doesn't mean that a street beggar, otherwise a homeless. If it is translated aniketa, niketana means home. Aniketa means without a home. So aniketa sthiramati, that is what is Gita says. Aniketaha sthiramati. So one should not be merely homeless, because if one is really homeless, like the beggars in the street are, then he is not sthiramati. He doesn't have a silent and thoughtful mind. His mind is agitated every time he feels that I should have a home, I should have a home. That is not what is meant here. Aniketa means one who is not attached to whichever home he stays. Whatever be its value, whatever be its comfort or lack of comfort, whatever he gets with the effort he puts in, unselfish effort he puts in, and just takes and is content with whatever he gets, that is his home. So wherever he goes, he doesn't feel that he is not in his home, because he is at peace with himself. He will find peace everywhere. That's why some people, when they find things not going on very smoothly in their homes, they want to just leave the home and go to some other place with the idea that there will be peace there. But they don't understand that unless the mind is silent and thoughtful, changing the home or changing the place doesn't really matter. It will be the same, because you will be taking the disturbed mind. The mind will be the same. So in that sense also here it is said one should be homeless, because the whole world is his home. So wherever he goes, whichever place God has put him in, whether it's a big home or a small home or a rented home or anything, that he considers to be his own home. So he feels secure, because he is secure because of his devotion to the Lord. So one who is steady in his idea, such a one, and he has to be steady in this idea that I have to depend on, only depend on the Supreme, the eternal, unchanging reality, not on the things which change. That is devotion or bhakti. If one believes in a personal God, then one has to superimpose those qualities, Sat, Chit and Ananda. Otherwise, Jnanis believe that Sat means eternal existence, Chit means eternal consciousness, not divided or little egos, but consciousness which is infinite, which is eternal.
You're working now.
1 minute. So that is what is meant here. Such alone become yogis. Now we come to that story which I referred to. You know about Narada. He was a great devotee of Vishnu, and his only job was to go all over the world and preach the glory of the divine name, repetition of the divine name. So he always believed, he was a singing minstrel, he was very good, he used to sing nicely, and he used to believe that whatever bhakti or knowledge of God I have, I should share with others. He was like that person in Sri Ramakrishna's parable who did not believe in eating the mango alone. There were some, Sri Ramakrishna tells this wonderful parable that there are some people who, when they see a mango, they'll go quietly, hide themselves and eat that whole mango. But there are other people who, whenever they see something good, they want to share it with others. They can't eat alone. So Narada was like that. He was very keen that the wonderful devotion which he had for the Lord, and it was making his life so peaceful, so joyful, and giving him so much of contentment, he wanted to share with others. So this Narada learns a wonderful lesson on patience. So just as great yogis are there, Narada was a great yogi. And he traveled everywhere. One day he was passing through a forest. And he saw a man who had been meditating until the white ants had built a huge mound round its body. So long had he been sitting in that position. Now, this person, white ants means normally when you are sitting in those ages, in the older yugas, people could meditate for years, for months and months together. They had that power, they had that steadiness. So this person had been meditating, and he was not even aware that white ants had built a huge mound round his body. So he was completely enclosed and he was not aware of that. And he said to Narada, then suddenly he woke up and saw Narada was walking by. So he said, where are you going? Narada replied, I am going to heaven. Then, of course, in this story, this person who was meditating for so many years that a mound of white ant, mound created by white ants had been built around him. So he was so much absorbed in meditation. But somehow when he saw Narada, he said, then you please ask God when you go to heaven. He said he is going towards heaven, to Vaikuntha. So then he said, ask God when he will be merciful to me and when I shall get nirvana. Though he was meditating, he had not become free. So he was just curious and said, since you are going there, why don't you ask God how long I have to meditate so that I will become free? Further, then ask God when he will be merciful, when I shall attain freedom. Narada said, okay. Further on, Narada saw another man. He was jumping about, singing, dancing, and said, oh Narada, where are you going? His voice and gestures were wild. Narada said, I am going to heaven. Then he said, he also said the same thing. But he was not sitting in one place, he was just singing and the glories of God. So he said, you ask God when I will be free. Narada went on. In the course of time, he came again by the same road. So he went to heaven and he came back. And there was the man who had been meditating with the anthill round him. And he said, oh Narada, did you ask about me? Did you ask God about me, that how long I have to sit so that I can get nirvana? Oh yes, he said. What did God say? The Lord told me that you would attain freedom in 4 more births. So this birth you will not attain, you will have to have 4 more births before you get nirvana. So you continue your meditation, but you won't get. So then that person, then the man began to weep and wail and said, I have meditated until an anthill has grown round me, and you say I have 4 more births. God says I have 4 more births. My God, this is too much. I have showed so much patience and meditated. So this is one sadhaka or one bhakta. Then he goes, Narada went to the other man. Did you ask my question? He also asked the same thing. He was singing. He was not meditating, or he was just singing and the glories of God. He was curious. What did God tell about me? Then, did you ask my question? Oh yes. Do you see this tamarind tree? I have to tell you that as many leaves are there on that tree, so many times you shall be born and then you shall attain freedom. So he pointed out to a tree under which that sadhaka was sitting and singing and dancing. He said, can you see this tree? The number of leaves, even if you are able to count, that many births you have to take before you will become free. The man began to dance for joy. The first person was upset because God had told him, Narada had told him that he had to endure 4 more births. So he was very impatient. Whereas this person jumps for joy and then said, oh, I shall have freedom after such a short time. That means he believed that as many leaves are there on this tree, at least after so many births I will have. It is definitely not infinite. So he thought even such a big not just 4 lives, but many lives, he was prepared to wait. He had so much patience. Then a voice came from above and said, "My child, you will have freedom this minute." That was the reward for his perseverance. So Narada got a good lesson, and that person also got a wonderful lesson that perseverance pays. It is good to be patient. So he was ready to work through all those births. Nothing discouraged him. So that shows the amount of tenacity that person had, and that led to his freedom. So God sees how much patience one person has. So patiently one has to repeat God's name, repeat the mantra given by the Guru, and just wait. If one is impatient and wants the result immediately, then you spoil everything. That is the essence of the story. But the first man felt that even 4 births were too long for him. Only perseverance like that of the man who was willing to wait aeons brings about the highest truth. So that kind of attitude if one has, then one can reach truth easily. So that is the whole essence of this story. So patience, Swamiji says, patience is a great virtue. Thakur also used to say, sa, sha, sha. One has to be very patient, one has to be very forbearing. Because in this, the plan of creation is such that it is so complex that one doesn't know when different things, obstacles come and stop our journey. When we are marching towards our goal, the spiritual goal, there will be obstacles, there will be problems. Nobody is free from any problem. So if one loses patience, then one cannot aspire to attain the goal. The moral of this story is that person who did not even lose his patience when he was told that he has to live so many lives, he was so content that at least I will realize God. He saw the positive side of Narada's statement, whereas the other fellow saw the negative side. He said, "Oh, 4 more births." And this fellow did not even mind if he had so many births, as long as he knew that at least after so many births I will have mukti. So he was not afraid or willing to wait, and that is why he got mukti immediately. So that is the moral of the story. Patience and perseverance pays a lot. It is always good to be patient and perseverant. Now we come to Patanjali's yoga aphorisms. Before he discusses the Yoga Sutras, Yoga, there are so many. Atha Yoganushasanam, that is the first sutra. We'll read the sutra and the meaning given by Swamiji. But before that, Swamiji is going to discuss a few points before he starts translating, not only translating, but trying to explain the gist of every sutra. Sutras are very small, cryptic sentences, and unless there is a commentary or there is some explanation, one cannot understand it. They are all short aphorisms. They are known as sutras. Before going into the yoga aphorisms, I shall try to discuss one great question upon which rests the whole theory of religion for the yogis. That, now he says, one theory one has to understand before he starts translating the sutras and explaining it. Swamiji is trying to say that one great question has to be understood and answered. He says, it seems the consensus of opinion of the great minds of the world, and it has been nearly demonstrated by researchers into physical nature, that every scientific system, especially the modern science, has come to a conclusion, and especially these modern researchers. Swamiji had the advantage of reading all the scientific theory, the science of truth, the science of rationality. So all these wonderful sciences which were developed and he had access to that. He says all the research as demonstrated by researchers into physical nature, though even a gross study of the nature shows one thing which is common to all the levels of existences. Whether you are gross, subtle or in the causal state, as a yogi when you grow up, the law doesn't change. The laws of the causal world, the gross world, are the same as the laws of the subtle world. The karma theory works there also. It works in a gross way, it works in a subtle way, and of course it works in a causal way. So he says everybody, especially Darwin and other people, believed in the theory of evolution. Everybody believes that we are the outcome and manifestation of an absolute condition back of our present relative condition and are going forward to return to that absolute. So whether it is the Adam and Eve theory, where Adam and Eve were pure but then they made mistakes and then they became gross, they worldly, and then again they will have to regain the paradise. They had lost the paradise and now they have to go back to paradise. So whether you take it the Christian way or you talk about mukti, everything seems to be moving in a cycle. That is what Swamiji says, that we have an absolute Satchidananda behind us. We have unfortunately got caught into this small jiva hood, this small body personality which is made of Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Vijnana, different koshas or the different levels of existences are as it were imprisoned our soul, the small soul which we have, which is actually one with the infinite universal soul, but unfortunately it has been covered with ignorance, the reason for which we don't know. But one thing he says, whether you believe in science or you believe in any philosophy, there is a perfect condition from which we have come down to imperfection. Adam and Eve were perfect, but once they ate the prohibited fruit, then they started degenerating and lost that pristine pure state. So here the outcome and manifestation of an absolute condition back of our present relative condition. Now we are in this mess, in this relative condition, but we were not like that. We were one with Brahman, but somehow through Maya we have come through that, but that doesn't mean we will always remain in this present condition. That is the main point of all religion, that we have come from God and now we are thinking of ourselves as separate from God, but a day will come when we will again go back. The whole cycle will repeat and will become one with God. And we are going forward to return to that absolute. This being granted, the question is, which is better, the absolute or this state? Now, the scientists will ask, we might have come from the absolute and now we are in this relative world and we might go back, but who says that is good? Even this state can be good. Why can't we stay in the relative? What is wrong? Which is a better state? So people who believe in the gross world, they'll say, no, this is better because we are sure of this. Let us eat, drink and be merry. We are sure of this. We know these are the rules of the world. We'll follow it. We'll do science. We will earn money. We will earn wealth. We'll enjoy it. Then we don't know what happens once the body goes. So even if you have to take a loan, as the Charvakas believed, they believed that this relative existence is everything. They did not care to even inquire about the higher, the original state from which we have come down. So every religion reminds you that don't be satisfied with the present state. That's why yesterday, the Gita, the Vishada Yoga was given deliberately before the Sankhya Yoga, before telling the glory of the soul. The Vishada, the sorrow, this sorrow or this disgust with the world was what motivated Krishna to aspire for something higher. If this disgust was not there, then he would not have aspired. So also the Swamiji says that people may believe that this relative state in which we are struggling, where we think we will be happy, we are chasing that happiness, but we never seem to get it. It is like that mirage. But still, this relative state is necessary because that experience of sorrow or experience of uselessness of the relative world will convince us. So the soul has to pass through all these things. That is what yoga tells us. This present condition is not your permanent condition. It is a relative condition. And you have to go back to that original condition. But you will not try to go back if you are happy. As long as you are happy, as long as Prakriti allows you to make fun, make merry, but sooner or later, the karma catches up with us. And then if we have taken the share of joy, we have to even sacrifice a little, we have to be sorrowful just to balance it. Because every sorrow, every joy that we got was at the expense of others. Swamiji puts it very nicely. People say we have to become rich. But you remember, the law of karma says that if you become rich, somebody else has to become poor. Rich nations can become rich only at the expense of some nations becoming poor. All can't become rich. It never happens like that. If somebody becomes rich, he is exploiting others. Otherwise, if he is normal, if he takes things as nature does, as Prakriti does, then everybody gets what he wants and God provides. That's why many poets have sung this, that God provides everything to nature. So that's why everywhere in nature except in human beings, you will find that kind of contentment, an inbuilt contentment. Whatever they want, they will enjoy. A lion will kill only to eat. After that, he will not go on killing mercilessly. So that is what survival or maybe contentment is built into the nature's plan. But human beings try to find some try to see the eternal. They are not satisfied with the relative thing. And they think by accumulating more and more gross things, they will get fulfillment. But that doesn't happen because the law of karma somehow catches. And Swamiji says, nature holds you by the neck and forces you to give up all the things which you have grabbed from others. And a day will come when you lose it, you start appreciating the eternal values. They said, oh, after all, this is a temporary thing which is not going to go with me. So should I spend my time in the relative world? The question of whether relative world is more important, worldliness is more important, or spirituality. Because a logical person will ask, what is the benefit of being spiritual? I am sure of the worldly things. There are so many glorious things. Let me enjoy this. So Swamiji gives this argument. Because to practice yoga, you have to be very clear about this idea that there are people, that there's many who think, I mean the scientists and all, that what creation you see around you is the highest state. That state which you speak of, where existence, consciousness and bliss, I don't believe in that. So also man becomes degraded when Adam and Eve were told not to eat the forbidden fruit. When they ate it, they became gross. And then they thought there is joy in this. Not until that joy goes away and sorrow comes, we have Vishada Yoga. If Arjuna was happy and if he was happy to wage the war, he would not have told Krishna and the Gita would not have been recited. The only reason why Sri Krishna had to tell him the 17 chapters was in the first chapter he gets confused and is full of sorrow, dejection, powerlessness, which comes due to clinging to the gross world. To get rid of it, this world is necessary. So it cannot be the highest state. That is the conclusion which Swamiji will say, that if thinkers of great caliber of the opinion that we are manifestation of an undifferentiated Satchidananda, undifferentiated being, whatever it is. But this state is fine. And the differentiated state is higher than the absolute. So the absolute, what is the fun? To get mukti. We are enjoying this. As long as he enjoys, this logic comes. Logic is there only till he is enjoying. But when he sees a miserable world, he doesn't like this relative world. He wants to get rid of it. So the differentiated state is higher than the absolute. They imagine that in absolute there cannot be any quality. It must be insensate, dull and lifeless. He said, what is there in that bliss? There is no objects of pleasure, there are no sense organs, no taste, no smell, no beauty. What is that state, undifferentiated state? Only the differentiated state we understand, we enjoy. But they are blind to the fact that enjoyment doesn't come. 50% enjoyment is followed by 50% sorrow. May not be immediately, but someday or the other. Then you don't want the differentiated world. Then you get tired and you say, no, I'll better be at peace and catch hold of that eternal nature of mine, reach that so that I don't have to struggle. I have to give up pleasures to give up pain. I can't say that I will have the pleasures and God you keep the pain. That never happens. So pleasure and pain come according to karma in fixed proportion, and one has to endure that. If one can endure both pleasure and pain, there's a beautiful poem by Rudyard Kipling. If the name of the poem is If. So if you can do that, if you can do this, all the verses of the Gita. Rudyard Kipling was born in India, though he was an Englishman, but he was born in India. He wrote some wonderful poetries based on Vedanta. So one of the poems is If. I'll try to put it on the WhatsApp. It's a nice poem which describes what we actually read in the Kurma Purana or in the Bhagavad Gita. How the two dualities, joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, heat and cold, the exact pair of opposites which we see in this relative world, can be the cause of joy but also can be the cause of sorrow. And when this joy and sorrow comes, sometimes if we are lucky, more sorrow comes, then we want to get rid and enjoy permanent bliss in the undifferentiated or absolute level. So the question Swamiji is asking is, this life, there are people, most of the people think that this is the only life that is to be enjoyed, the differentiated world. So one has to decide which is superior. Otherwise one cannot practice yoga. First of all, we want to inquire into other solutions of life. There was an old solution that man after death remained the same, that all his good sides minus his evil sides remain forever. Now there are so many theories of life after death. Now we will discuss it in the next class. If there are questions, you can ask, because this idea, before Swamiji starts the yoga, he tries to discuss what is the need for yoga. If we are satisfied with the present world, there is no need for yoga. Until we experience some kind of sorrow, or maybe we anticipate some kind of sorrow, all don't have to experience it in this life to go towards spirituality. Maybe in the past life they've experienced enough sorrow so that they know that this time we should not be caught. So the relative merit of the relative world and the absolute world, that which is eternal, blissful, Sat, Chit and Ananda, is that a desirable state, or is the life in the world a desirable state? Now Swamiji will discuss that and first come to a conclusion, because only if we believe that the absolute state is peaceful, more joyful, eternally joyful and fulfilling, then only we will give up this world. Otherwise we will be attached to the world. We don't want to lose this world. So what are the conditions? How do people argue? Why do they think that since the relative world has come from the absolute reality, then it should be the same? So why not enjoy this? Why not hold this to be real? So what is the answer? We'll discuss in the next class. So if there are some questions, you can ask. I'm changing the layout.
Pranam Swamiji.
Yes, namaste.
Namaste Swamiji. Yeah. So Swamiji, you just said that if there is a gain, if you gain something, somebody is in money terms, somebody else is losing it. So in the US and I'm sure in UK maybe also, that a lot of our investments from our jobs are in the stock market, right? So if the shares are rising, somebody is losing. Is that right? Is that what?
Yeah, that is from your standpoint. What I'm saying is the pleasure and pain of the world is balanced. If somebody gets more wealth, whether the share market goes up or goes down, that is immaterial. If it goes up, you gain more wealth. That doesn't matter. Share market and economy have their own rules. They don't follow, they have the same law of karma maybe, that if you have done good karma, maybe the shares will go up and without any effort, you think you have got a big benefit. but actually you have worked for it. Nobody gets anything for free in this world. But my point was that what is good to you will be at the expense of some people who cannot afford it. Now everybody does not invest in shares. There are so many poor countries. So you may ask, if everything is good, if everybody becomes rich, there's no poor in this whole world, then it would be a nice place. But will it ever happen? That was the question. It's not a question of how you earn your money. It can be through a lottery, it can be through shares values going up and down. If it goes down, you are sorrowful. You feel you have lost money, though you have not lost anything. You have invested a certain money. It's just an illusion. You suddenly find the share value goes up and you think now you have become a billionaire. There are people who put their money in the share market and one day they will wake up to find the share value has gone up. Oh, then they will say, oh, we have become billionaires. I am 1 billion richer now. And next day the share market collapses and then he says, oh, I have lost. But he has not lost or gained anything. He is the same person. But it is an illusion. That is what Sri Ramakrishna says, or this world, this relative world is always like this. There will be a mixture of joy and sorrow. No foolish person also will believe that in his life there will be only joy and there will be no sorrow. That is the idea.
Yeah, so then Swamiji, how do we practice this then? That means we should not be investing because...
Yeah, you risk, but at the same time, if you lose, don't worry. You have to treat, that's what he says, now whether good comes or evil comes, you have to take it as, you should not be disturbed. You see, that is very important, that one should not lose. If one wants to become a yogi, one wants to attain that absolute state, then the relative state, there will be ups and downs, but you have to treat both pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow, everything as the same, which is very difficult, no doubt. It is a difficult thing. It's easy to say, but difficult to practice. But it has to be practiced.
Yes, I agree. But you mentioned, Swamiji, that when we are gaining money, somebody else is losing. But we did not invest and make that person lose. We didn't have an attitude. Our intention was not that we...
No, whatever be the intention. See, rich countries, when they amassed lot of wealth, their intention is not to make others poor. But by default, others become poor. Now, when British ruled India, they thought they should make every British citizen happy, isn't it? They wanted money for themselves, they wanted money for their relatives, they wanted to grab as much money as possible. So they were not sensitive to what happens to the people, the millions of people, whether they are dying or how much they are earning, how much luxury they have, what are they eating. They are not concerned. So it's not a question of directly or indirectly. Even if the share value goes up and you become rich for some reason, the person who cannot even invest a few pennies in the share market, is he suffering or not? He is suffering. He's suffering because
basically, then as per our Vedanta practice, we should not be investing in stock market.
No, not necessary. Not necessary. If you invest, you should be prepared to lose everything also. A day may come when nobody guarantees that the share values the whole thing may collapse. The economy may collapse. Even a small
virus. Of course, one is prepared for that.
We say we are prepared. The idea is one has to be prepared for that. Not only prepared for that, one has to practice that. That is prepared. Everybody says he is prepared, but when it comes, then they feel they want some solution. Then they'll go here, go there, create a big furore. That's what happens. So it's easy to say that one has to be prepared. So many countries may say we will try to become rich, but if we become poor, we'll be equally happy. Will they be able to say? Will the people be able to say that I will try, I will invest, but if I lose also, it is fine. And if so that sporting attitude or that neutral attitude comes only if one has a deep spiritual background. Otherwise, when we lose our sleep, we lose our patience, we lose our joy. We feel so anxious, we feel so much of fear. when the shares go down, then we want to just take our money out. And in some countries, you can't even take your money out. It simply vanishes into thin air in your presence. So that can also happen when World War comes. The COVID thing itself has destroyed the economy without anybody trying, It has completely made the poor still poorer, the rich also poor. It has affected everybody. So
Swamiji, when we do not take it nicely, when we lose, then that affects our karma also?
yes, definitely. That adds to your karma because you are attached to your wealth. And that not only affects the karma, it spoils your peace. It's a question of your peace, na? Your health gets affected. Everything suffers.
Okay, thank you, Swamiji.
Okay, namaste. Any question? Any more question or?
I wrote question, Maharaj.
Yes, just a minute. There are you have asked. Neuroscience suggests that using the brain by learning new things, learning a language is a way to reduce the risk of developing dementia illness like Alzheimer's. So, does our spiritual practice equate and help us to have optimum mental health in older? Yes, definitely. It is not just mathematics or they ask you to play games, isn't it? Old people in the care homes are asked to use it. There is a nice proverb, or not proverb, the neuroscientists say, use it or lose it. If you don't use your neurons, the neurons start growing at the age, right from when the baby is born, the neurons in the brain go on multiplying exponentially in the brain. And after a certain age, the neurons don't grow. Then there is a downward curve. So, whatever neurons are there, they are more than enough. There may be billions in billions. So, when these neurons, it's not the presence of neurons that are important. It is the neural activity or the connection between one neuron and the other. If that is maintained, if the pathways are maintained, that is why purity and activity. The Kurma Purana says, not only should you be pure, but you should be active mentally. One should be thoughtful, because thought discrimination, when we live on the Vijnanamaya Kosha level, not just the Manomaya Kosha level, the brain neurons or the neuronal activity becomes very intense. So meditation, definitely it is 10 times more powerful, or maybe 100 times more powerful than keeping the mind just active. People are asked to play cards or do some game or something so that they don't become dull, the old people, to prevent the disease. Of course, there are biological causes also. If the brain gets damaged because of some other reason, then one can lose memory. But there's no guarantee that you won't have Alzheimer's or dementia and all those things. But meditation definitely is a good way to keep the mind healthy. That is sure.
But also, Maharaj, if we just study Vedanta, is that limiting? Should we learn other things?
No, not necessary. Now, what is the purpose of learning? It's not just, that's why the problem with modern psychology is they'll say just play some games, play some chess, or keep your mind active. The idea is not that you have to keep your mind active. Active for a purpose. If you study, you can study anything. But what does that study lead you to? Does it lead you to a higher life? If that helps you, whether it is Vedanta, Buddhism, Christianity, prayer, meditation, japa, any activity that makes you less gross, not dependent on the brain. So brain becomes, you have control over our brain. Alzheimer's means the brain controls you. Your thoughts stop. Your dementia means what? You are not able to do your daily tasks because it's the brain, death of the brain cells is dictating. It may happen to a spiritual person also, but he will live on a different plane. I mean, his mind will still be active. Externally, you might find, we have seen some very senior monks, apparently they were not very active outside. But when you talk to them about spirituality, suddenly the old memories will come and their mind is active in a different plane. So it's not necessary that all people who have Alzheimer's or dementia or all these things, if they had some spiritual training before, the physical damage to the brain will not affect them. Even when one is in a coma, you could see Mahapurush Maharaj and all, when they had the stroke and all, their mind was very alert and active. So they don't need the instrumentality of the brain. They are not dependent. The whole idea is how gross you are, how subtle you are. The more subtle you are, the less you will be dependent on the neural conditions of the brain. The more independent you are, then the brain is happy. The body may be sick, the brain may be not functioning well, but that is just an organ. Mind is independent. The buddhi is independent. That is the important thing to understand in Vedanta, that mind it uses the brain, but it is not dependent on the brain. If you make it independent, then you can prevent all these things. You cannot prevent the disease, but it will not be effective. So the apparent Alzheimer's and other things, they will not affect the higher faculties of the mind, which will anyway be working in a spiritual person. He will be doing his japa, he will be doing all the thinking, discrimination, all the things will be there. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
There's one question. Swami, the inequality of the world is painful. What is your advice to a spiritual aspirant who is comfortable in an economic sense? Now, economic sense is not the only thing gross in this world. See, it's a good question that one may be satisfied economically. Economy wise, he has no problem. So it's not painful that way. But do we see that all people who are economically stable, are they peaceful? Do they not feel pain? They can find 1,001 reasons to create pain for themselves. They may have enough to eat, enough to live for 7 generations. They may have enough money for 7 generations of theirs. But still, can you not find people unhappy, committing suicides? If money was the economic sense only was important, then everybody would have been happy. But sorrow comes in different ways. One may be economically safe and secure, but he may suffer pain in some different way. Emotionally, his relationships, there may be so many other issues. Health may be an issue, physical issues, mental issues, relationship issues. So there are so many hundreds and thousands of ways of feeling sorrow or pain. And then there may be some people who may be suffering or struggling economically, but they are happy. Their happiness index, some of the poor countries have higher happiness indexes than the rich countries. They have so many parameters to measure the happiness. So if contentment is there, poverty or economic condition will not decide whether they feel the world is painful or not. That is why for a Jivan Mukta, this painful world becomes a mart of joy. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, my mother's world, this is just a mart of joy. He had cancer. Holy Mother had so many problems. They were economically not at all self-sufficient by any means. They were so poor economically. But did you ever see Holy Mother or Thakur or Swamiji ever? Swamiji also suffered a lot. Economic poverty, physical health, bad physical health. But he never lost joy in his life. So it is not dependent. the inequality of the world is not painful that way. Swamiji was believing, in fact, he was angry because God has created a world, has given so much money to some people and he is in poverty. So that inequality was painful for him. But later on it became, he overcame that. When Thakur asked him to go and ask for economic help from Mother Kali, he got an answer. And then he found that economic equality is not the solution to the world's problems. If you are economically equal, you will quarrel for something else. Sometimes if you have more money, then it can be a problem because there will be competition. If somebody becomes rich, he will want to become richer. So his sorrow will be that there are many people richer than him. So he goes on and on. If one has property, he will feel, oh, the other person has so much property. He has so many cars. So we can be painful, this world can be painful in either case. Okay? Yeah. So your answer to your question is that one who is comfortable in an economic sense, at least one part of it, if he is content with that, he can focus on his spiritual practices. That is true. But how can one make use of that economic security one has to enhance one's spiritual pursuits? That is a challenging task because there are other problems. It's not just the economic sense. Now the other question is, could you give us an illustration of tamasic silence inactivity and the difference from sattvic sincere silence activity that looks like inactivity? It is very clear. Swamiji has very clearly said, one who is silent, not only silent, but also thoughtful. Tamasic means you will not have thoughts. There will be absence of coherent thoughts. You will either be sleeping or there will be random thoughts and restless thoughts. He will be silent, but that silence is a result of thoughtlessness, no thoughts or no good thoughts or maybe evil thoughts or dull thoughts, where he just feels lazy and just feels like passing time. So that is an excellent example of tamasic silence. Whereas a sattvic person, he may be very silent outwardly, but inwardly is either doing japa continuously or meditating on the truths, something creative he is doing. So his mind is not restless. He is doing it in a very peaceful way. Continuous flow of thoughts are there. So that thoughtfulness is the difference between these two. So the illustration of a tamasic silence, which is full of either inactivity or a negative activity, and a sattvic is full of activity, though outwardly inactive, but activity in a positive sense, which takes you from gross to the subtle, higher and higher. That is the test of all tamasic and rajasic. Tamasic will make you more gross, make you feel more lazy, make you feel more inert and more gross. Whereas if silent, sattvic silence will make you feel light, make you feel exuberant, joyful, and always it gives you a feeling. Even physically you can feel very light and in a good mood. So it's very clear. A tamasic person never enjoys his silence. He might sleep, he might go to sleep. That's the best he can do. But a sattvic person will, even his silence can become a source of joy and peace and bliss. Okay? So shall I take your leave? Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste.
Thank you, Maharaj. Pranam.